Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Hilaal Live. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us, and of course, my colleague Luqman Shadrack for taking you through that first part of the show, which of course he broadcasts from our Cape Town studio. Now, yesterday, of course, one of the top news stories to occur was that of Ghaleb Cachalia, who has quit the Democratic Alliance, saying the party had a growing dysfunctional, undemocratic and authoritarian tendency. Cachalia's resignation follows a dispute related to utterances he made over Israel's current war on Gaza. Joining us now is Mr. Cachalia himself. Mr. Cachalia, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and jazakallah so much for making the time for us in your busy schedule.
Wa alaikum salam. It's good to be with you.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Mr. Cachalia, let's start off, of course, with, comments that you made a couple of months ago with regards to the war on Gaza. The writing was on the wall, wasn't it, in terms of there being a separation between yourself and, of course, the Democratic Alliance, given their stance with regards to the war and, of course, their allegiances to Israel?
Well, look, I think my stance was predictable. It's been clear. Didn't start with the 7th of October. I've been clear on this for many, many years, decades. And the DA, there are many people in the DA who have different stances from me, but I have two issues. One is that we must respect the fact that people have different stances. And in a political party, particularly over contentious issues, we must be able to debate and analyze and discuss those issues. And secondly, we mustn't be driven in an authoritarian way because we cannot be seen to take a particular view or support a particular view. Now, those two things irk me, and that has come to bear and resulted in the mess that we find ourselves in.
Mr. Cachalia, you've written, of course, in the statement, 15 key points that you've mentioned. Now, I am going to go through not all of them, but of course, just some of them. In your shadow cabinet, I mean, you actually did quite well. Was there not a consideration with regards to, of course, the job that you've done in that as a shadow minister? And was there not something that you could, take yourself to when presented and say, look, here's something that I've excelled quite well in? Maybe there isn't a reason for you to, of course, have the split with regards to the DA. Were they looking at your performance and saying that Ghaleb Cachalia can still be an asset within the Democratic Alliance?
They weren't looking at it at all. There was an internal evaluation done on performance over a period of time in the and you were scored on various parameters. I scored 100%. How much more do you want than that? They know that. They scored me on that. And yet they fired me.
And that is, of course, I think the reason why, this kind of feels a little bit bittersweet, is that you scored 100%, and they weren't able to go ahead and look at that as a reason to actually keep you and, of course, see you as some sort of an asset, especially in an election year.
Well, the trouble is that they don't like people speaking their mind, and particularly speaking their mind on Israel. There's an authoritarian strain. There is a problem with taking a particular moral stance on Israel. I don't care whether they take a stance on whether they keep going on about a two-state solution and 67 borders and this and this. It's not my job or their job or any party's job to tell the Palestinians what to do. The Palestinians will decide what they're going to do. What kind of state they want, they will negotiate in time. What I am doing now is what every country and every government and many, many, many throughout the world have done, is to say what is going on is unconscionable. There's an evolving genocide and it must stop now. There must be a ceasefire. And why must there be a ceasefire? So that the people can get around a table and negotiate a solution themselves. I don't have to tell them what to do. Who am I?
Mr. Cachalia, the cease and desist, I want to bring that because, of course, you received that from the Democratic Alliance. For obviously, anyone who lives under a rock or the Labour out there, could you maybe explain that? Is that some sort of a gagging order against you to make any supposed public comments?
Well, it's a very plain gagging order. It says you cannot speak on Gaza, you cannot speak on Israel, you cannot speak on Palestine, and you can't tell anybody that you have been told not to speak. You can speak on how wonderful the DA is, how wonderful John Steenhuisen is, which is not. You can speak on the flowers in your garden. You can speak on anything else. You can how bad the ANC is, but you can't mention the war.
Mr. Cachalia, I don't want to shift away from obviously the DA, but a very similar party, the Action SA. Mr. Darsoto, of course, resides in KwaZulu-Natal.
Yes.
Made
He
very
told me.
similar, made similar comments to what you said. He, of course, has now left the Senate of the Action SA. The DA and the Action SA, of course, they're two different parties, but very similar core values to a certain extent. Is it worrying that when comments like this are being made, especially with regards to a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, it's concerning that given that this democracy, which has been fought over for decades and decades, we are now at a point where you can't make comments about a humanitarian disaster that's happening in Gaza?
Well, that's plainly what seems to be the case. I mean, there are a couple of small parties and a couple of want-to-be parties that will take a different line. But you're perfectly right. In the Freedom Front Plus, in the ACDP, in Action South Africa, in the DA, they've all clubbed together and will never take a line on a proper, decent humanitarian stance, which says, after all, nothing more than stop the war, stop the genocide, stop corralling people into a small territory, give them water. Ya Allah, give them water, give them food, give them fuel. Do not bomb their places of worship. Do not pulverize to the ground their universities. Do not destroy their homes. Stop this madness. That is what needs to be done. And that's not what they're saying, and they will never say it. They say, let's have a humanitarian pause. What does that mean? We stop for a while so we can give you 2 aspirins and a Band-Aid and a little sip of water to take it down with. And then we say, start the bombing again. What a disaster.
Mr. Cachalia, I think both you and I know there's especially within Cape Town and the Western Cape, the amount of Muslim residents that are there is quite massive. I mean, in Johannesburg, it's huge, but of course the DA is not the ruling party within this province, and of course they sit in a coalition within the city of Johannesburg. I know that you, of course, are not part of the party, but are they not concerned that this is a party who is presenting themselves as the best alternative, and I'm saying that in inverted commas because that's what they're saying, to running South Africa? Are they not afraid, given that the Muslim vote within South Africa, it's in jeopardy for them? Are they not concerned that their allegiance towards Israel is going to hamper that?
Well, I haven't run the numbers. I don't know, perhaps they do, exactly how many Muslim votes are at stake that were previously in the bag, as it were, for the DA in the Western Cape or in Gauteng or in Johannesburg. I don't know, but it must be a sizable number, is what I can say. Now, how much of that is at risk? I don't know either, but a sizable proportion of that, in my experience and my anecdotal experience, is at risk because people are livid. And that must be, they must be computing that. But the computation not with understanding, they're between a rock and a hard place, because you have the votes that you may lose on the one hand, and you have the money that you may gain on the other hand. So what do you go for? The votes or the 30 pieces of silver or the truth?
Well, I think the DA has made their mind up with regards to that. Mr. Cachalia, before we go to the break and continue this conversation, I remember 8 years ago, of course, you joined the Democratic Alliance. A lot of people were quite shocked, given, your late parents' association with the African National Congress, and of course, you yourself leaving the party. And of course, I remember your words carefully. You're joining a party that really can offer something different to South Africans and allow South Africans to vote for a party which could really bring about the necessary change, given that South Africa was still in those years of state capture. Is there a disappointment that, maybe you could not see it out with the DA, or is the DA now a party that people are going to look beyond voting? And I'm taking away, obviously, the situation with regards to what's happening in Gaza, but them as a party, do they still stand in good stead with the people post you departing them?
Again, I don't know. I cannot answer that categorically, but I can tell you this. If I step outside the box, this is a lose-lose situation. If you step, because I can't affect change within the DA, the DA can't affect, it's on the back foot in terms of the voters that you pointed out, and so on, and they can't affect the necessary change. So the question for me is, and I'm applying my mind to how one can step outside the box and provide all parties, not just the DA, not only in this country, and countries across the world, with a mechanism which allows them not to get locked in this particular situation, which allows for the free flow of information, which allows for the policy arguments and debates to happen, which allows for it to be done technologically. I mean, we're not in the 18th century. We're not in an Edwardian world, which is where politics lives, sadly, across the world, in wooden paneled offices and leather chairs. We're in a technological world, and we must understand that that has improved and enhanced our world. Now we must apply our mind as to how we can bring that to bear to parties so that they can stop these log jams, so that they can evolve policies, so it can be interactive with their voters, so their voters can have a real say and not just be force-fed what the leaders say. That is what needs to be done.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Ghaleb Cachalia, and we'll be back after this break. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. I'm in conversation with Ghaleb Cachalia. Of course, just yesterday, he had announced his resignation from the Democratic Alliance. Mr. Cachalia, since, of course, you joined the party, there's been quite high-profile members that have left, the likes of Herman Mashaba, Mmusi Maimane. This week, Kumar Ramolifo, of course, he departed the Democratic Alliance. Now, I want to bring about the point where you say authoritarian. Is the DA that party now where members in good standing, like Mashaba, Maimane, yourself, Ramolifo, looking at it saying, listen, we can't take this anymore. We have to depart from this party because it's just not sticking to the core principles and values that you uphold as a person?
Look, I think the structures in the DA tend to that authoritarianism, and that has to change. There is an allegiance, although unsaid, to a socialist communist idea of democratic centralism, as opposed to the liberal principles of freedom of expression and federalism, which the DA is supposed to maintain and uphold. Now, as for those who left, Herman Mashaba is probably the most authoritarian person I've met. And in the actual essay, I think he will replicate that authoritarianism. I don't know what Mmusi Maimane is doing in his organization, but he was reasonably authoritarian when he was in the DA. So it's a systemic problem. Kumar Ramolifo was not a leader, so I can't talk about, he didn't have the opportunity or to be evaluated on he's on the authoritarian scale or not. But as I say, this is a systemic problem, and this needs to be addressed and dealt with. It's across all parties. It sits in the ANC as well. ANC is worse. Have you ever heard anybody, ordinary member, ordinary MP in the ANC speak out on anything? They never speak. Well, does the DA want to be like that?
Mr. Cachalia, one final question on the DA. You said that there are still good people within that party. So I'm assuming you still maintain a good camaraderie between, your former members and people that, of course, you would have made friends with within that party.
I've received huge amounts of telephone calls and WhatsApp messages and emails from people within the party who say, how much they valued me as a colleague, how much they valued my input, how much they valued me as a friend, how much they want to stay in touch, and how sorry they am that I've left. So, that's what it is.
Mr. Cachalia, in, of course, your statement, you say that, you will evaluate, consider your future to serve human rights, economic prosperity, and a more inclusive economy. Now, I know, Mr. Cachalia, you still have the politics bite within you. That bug will never leave. Where to now for Ghaleb Cachalia? Where does he see himself within South Africa, whether it's politics or business?
Well, with those things you mentioned, those three things, inclusive democracy, economic prosperity, human rights, and I'll add social justice as my leading lodestars, if you like, I will focus on where I can operate. I will scan the landscape of existing parties. I will look at the opportunities in afforded independent candidates. I will understand what opportunities there are to broker a greater understanding and to break down the logjams that exist in the hidebound system and the broken system that we have in the structure of our politics that is living in the dark ages. I will also look at opportunities within NGOs and within political consultancies and the like, and see what I can do. What I haven't. This has only happened yesterday. I have made no firm decisions, but I am investigating those.
Would you answer a call from Lutuli House, Mr. Cachalia?
Yeah, I speak to anybody. I speak to anybody.
No, but for them to have you return to the party.
But I'm not. The ANC is broken. The ANC is rotten. The ANC is inept. The ANC is venal. And the ANC's policies are bad in large measure. Some are good, but in large measure they are bad. The ANC cannot fix itself. The ANC needs to be knocked off its perch and to reinvent itself. It can't. I can't go there. So I'm not sure that I can go to any other party either.
Mr. Cachalia, a lot of political parties. I mean, I've lost the count that there is, but I know there was quite a few that just added their names to the IEC list. Are we in a contested space right now within politics? Because there is so much, and I mean, it's beautiful for democracy, but is it too contested right now within the space, especially heading into this year's polls?
I think it's insanely over contested in terms of parties. Every second person from Aloysius Maimane to Songezo Zibi wants to be president of this country. And everyone wants to rule the roost. Everyone wants to have a bite at the cherry. Some of them want to honestly deliver what they think is better. Others want to have a chance at eating more. It's, as I say, the system is fundamentally broken. And that needs application, and that needs both internal application and external application outside the parties. That is what it needs, what needs to be focused on. And I'm looking at that very carefully.
Mr. Cachalia, you were there obviously at the dawn of democracy. You served, within the African National Congress at the time. You saw the euphoria and, of course, the leadership the late Nelson Mandela brought, of course, Thabo Mbeki. Then Jacob Zuma comes, and of course, we see those years of state capture occurring. How bad is the leadership crisis within South Africa? I ask this because, every person on the street is yearning for that. They're yearning for leadership to be taken up, take that mantle, and lead South Africa. Are we in a space where leadership really is in a massive crisis right now?
Across the party political spectrum, there isn't one leader worth his salt or her salt. That's the simple answer.
But how do we fix that? Does one election just solve it? Because, I mean, that's what everyone's
No.
hanging on to. They're hanging on to 2024 to be that savior for South Africa.
No, we need to begin to sow the seeds of democracy, direct democracy, where constituents have a say in the people that they elect and who say in what they do and how they do it and why they do it. And that's the value of a vote, where not to a party, but to an individual who you can hold accountable. And where you can give, not only hold accountable, but whom you can give input into. Where you can say that I am a constituent, I have a right to help formulate what you are going to champion. That is direct democracy. That doesn't exist. They come to you, the parties, every 5 years and say, vote for me. And then they're going to do what they want to do.
Mr. Cachalia, we'd like to say Jazakallah so much for joining us, and all the best for whatever decision you make next after this.
Jazakallah, shukran, and thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's Ghaleb Cachalia, of course, just resigned from the DA yesterday. And of course, we will be keeping an eye out on what he does with regards to either his political future, of course, work within social justice. He's spoken about being part of an NGO, or he may even go into business. We will see what happens with regards to that. But quite interestingly, another senior leader, of course, quitting within the Democratic Alliance. So interesting to see what happens with regards to that party, of course, being the official opposition to the African National Congress. After the break, I'll have your latest in news, finance, and sports. Do stay tuned.